page document that we were given and reviewed. It goes into great detail about the proofing process. I've been here 14 years and haven't had a problem with that, but it's a very complicated process. So I'll ask either, well, we have Mr. Cleary here. Why don't you tee us up there, Mr. Cleary?
Yeah, the new Secretary of State, when they updated the election officials manual here early 2021, they put in an extra requirement, which requires the board to either approve a policy or come and approve all ballot proofs. Based on the size and scope of our county, we figured a ballot proofing procedure would be much easier. Based on if we have an even year election, we could have 5,000 ballot styles. It takes us about 14 days to proof that, working weekend overtime. So we figured the ballot proofing policy would be much easier and more efficient on our end.
So first, introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Brian Clary. I'm the manager of the ballot department.
You're responsible for the proofing.
I am responsible for the proofing and all that. So what we try to do in the proofing policy is lay out, we obviously have different size and scopes of the election. So how we break it out in the ballot department is whether it's an odd year, an even year, a primary or a general. And then there's various different forms and everything we use to proof based on what is in the election and then obviously how many issues and everything there are. So we tried to lay that out in each of the documents, and I think they're in the document it lists out the even years, odd years, generals, primaries, some general guidelines for what we do in proofing, and then things we do above and beyond what's required by the state, such as we, during our public view, we actually email a copy of the ballot to every candidate or issue petitioner that appears on the ballot, so they can also give us their input on how their name appears or how the issue appears on the ballot.
So this is done in a bipartisan manner.
It is correct. Every ballot that is looked at by a bipartisan team. So we have our supervisors that will train the staff on exactly this policy or the procedure before this policy existed. We have teams of Democrats and Republicans that will then look at the ballot based on whatever round we're in as laid out in this policy. And they will follow a checklist assigned to that round and look at whatever we tell them to down the election until we get 2 full clean rounds where we find nothing wrong with any ballot style. And then we feel confident that we can go ahead and go give the approval to print out.
And I ask these questions because I just want the public that's listening and even an appreciation from the board members and other staff how detailed and involved this process is, correct?
It's correct. It's a large process. It takes a lot of people. In our countywide election for last November, I'll use an example. We had 40 temps, 20 teams that proved for 14 days, 10 hours a day, every day. Just to get it right, it was a large, quite a few issues, quite a few people on the ballot. The gubernatorial primary is our hardest ballot because obviously that has the Democratic precinct committeemen, state committee members and stuff like that. A lot of ballot styles in that one.
So, for example, this cycle now, which is an off-year cycle, it's a local. How many styles will you have about?
We have 18 styles for this one. We just began laying it out today. So the initial thing is about 18 styles. There's 11 issues on the ballot plus 2 contests. Different styles the candidates rotate through, so we do have a few more styles than we have issues in that, but it's a much more simple ballot than we would normally prove.
And let's just do a little example. I'm the Republican and you're the Democrat, and we're reading down the ballot. And I'm literally going, and if it's missed stick and running, I will actually say L. And what do you respond to that?
I will, if I'm the one person will actually have a copy of the ballot, and one person will have a copy of the source document. So if you have the source document, if we're doing a candidate race, they will actually read the name. There's a line on the petition that says, name how you want to appear on the ballot. So they will actually spell out the individual's full name. So they'll say capital L-I-S-A, space, capital S, and then continue on the last name. And then I'm checking it off on the list, on the actual ballot itself to ensure that that is indeed how it appears on the ballot. If there's a middle initial, we want to make sure there's a period there. Junior, senior, the third, whatever, we want to make sure all that appears is that it appears name on the ballot.
This is done 2 times. Twice. Once you're through the whole cycle.
Once we get through the entire county or whatever the size and scope of the election is, we make if there's any changes, we'll make those in the EMS system, the election management system. We'll then print out a new round. If there were no changes, we'll just print out a new round and repeat the process, giving it to a different set of eyes. So if you and I prove Fayetteville is the first time, we cannot get it the second time. That'll go to a different Democrat and Republican, so we can have at least 4 sets of eyes. And then as a last resort, what we do is we take all the issues and we make a file of those and we send them over to the Candidate Petition Services Division. And then their team, they have a team of Democrat and Republicans proof every issue that appears on the ballot as well.
So you work with another department.
We do work with other departments.
And what role does this management software, the ballot management software play in this whole process?
It actually is responsible for creating and laying out the entire ballot. So the Secretary of State gives us a sample ballot, usually attachment with any ballot directive that we get. And we try to do it as best we can to match that. Obviously, in the state, there's multiple systems being used, so you can't exactly get it perfect. but and with us having a bilingual ballot, it doesn't always look exactly the same, but we try to get it as close as we can to the sample, with shading, bolding, font sizes. The font sizes and everything are required by ORC, but everything else we try to get as close as we can. And then once we have that, the election manager system allows us to move races, try to make it look as legible and, and as easy to read as possible, because obviously that's what we want for the voters. We don't want to cram as much as we can just so we can fit as much as we can on the ballot. We try to take that into consideration. Cost is always a thought in our mind, but we're always trying to get it to be as legible and as easy to read as possible.
So I'm going to open up the floor. I know I'm hard and kind of the questions, but you have to do this also in Spanish.
That's right.
And so you have to get a Democrat, Republican that's fluid in Spanish too.
We have, no, we don't. We actually proof letter by letter for Spanish, because we don't want to restrict who we're giving that to. So what we tell them for the Spanish team is, just like the English, spell it out by letter. So if it's an A, B, C, D, E, if it has an apostrophe or whatever that would be, or upside down question mark for questions for Spanish, they will just say that out loud and then we confirm that that's done. We do have a Spanish translation service that we use to give us our Spanish. And then we also have the outreach division. They have our bilingual speaker that she reviews them all as well.
And then finally, your department is familiar with the ballot remake procedure. I mean, that's another policy that we've adopted.
That is another policy we do within our department, yes. So that as well.
And that has evolved over the years. That policy.
This will probably.
And then finally, who kind of put this policy together? Obviously, you were involved.
Yes, the management team and our program coordinator and supervisors, we worked as a team of 6, 7 to get this together. We had it reviewed by the staff. We then sent it to the administration for further review, and then we forwarded it on to you.
And is it at some point going to be sent to the SOS, for their purposes, so they know? Or
we're not required to do that, but we always can. I mean, anything that we have or any other county wants to borrow, use, we're glad to share.
I would suggest it. And thank you. I'll open up to my other board members. So sorry for taking all that time.
That's good questions.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Mr. Chair, could we first ask folks who are on the phone to mute themselves, because we're getting an echo? There's a number of folks I just see. There's if they could just mute themselves, it just would be helpful to hear a little better.
Thank you.
The only question I had, actually, I mean, it's a lot of work clearly went into this policy. Have we had any ballot proofing errors that have caused us problems in the past? And honestly, I don't recall that we have, but I was just curious because we've had fairly elaborate proofing for a good while in advance of this policy. I just was wondering if we've ever had any issues with errors.
I've been a manager in the department, either assistant or the manager, for 15 years. We have never had any errors that I know of that go out on the ballot.
That's what I thought.
I think
we're all knocking on wood on that one, but thanks so much. The policy is very detailed, and clearly, time was taken to put it together. But even more importantly, I'm glad that we, in practice, have been doing what we have now codified in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chappelle. And I do recall back in the day, probably when you first got involved, Brian, when Ms. Platten was the director, we started sending out to all the candidates their names so they could prove it too.
Yeah, former Director Platten started that, and we just continued it. I think we started that in 2008, right, and we've been doing it ever since.
Right. Is that done by email generally?
Hopefully by most of them by email. Most of the candidates are pretty good about giving us their email, but if we don't, we do actually physically mail them a copy in the mail.
Okay. And you're going to begin this process for the May election this week or early next week?
We did the imports today. We're starting to lay out the ballot, like as I said, and then we'll start printing out the first part of it, which is all the reports that come with it to make sure the import came over correctly. And then we'll start going ahead and proof the ballots early next week, Monday.
Yeah. And we did have some temps report this week, so they're starting to train. That's going through. And I think Brian did it on this, like they train before the different layers and sections of it. So they will get general training, they'll get training on the first round style, whatever it is, they'll get training on the next one. They sign off on all these training acknowledgements that they understand what's going on. So we don't want errors, but we can trace things back. We can show that they're trained, they sign off, that they prove stuff, again, so we know who's done it, the bipartisan team. One of the things that has made us so successful is just the simple concept of 2 clean rounds. So you think you're almost there, somebody finds one little thing, well, guess what? You don't go through and do one, okay, we got one good one, you go two more. So it's always that two more, which really gives us good confidence that it's absolutely correct.
It's a problem that if we find a mistake and says Mayfield Heights, we don't just reproof Mayfield Heights, we reproof the entire county for a clean round.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Cleary? Thank you for this policy, and obviously a lot of time and effort went into it. Hearing no other questions, all those in favor of the motion to approve the ballot proofing procedure, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, motion passes unanimously. And I will move on to authorize and approve the remake of optical scan ballots for the February 23rd, 2021 Woodmere recall election. Mr. Cleary, do you want to kind of tee that up?
Sure. You should have a copy of the official results and the certification report for the February 23rd, 2021 recall election that took place in Woodmere. There were a total of 181 ballots tabulated for this election. They break down as follows. There were 113 election day ballots, 37 ballots were cast vote by mail, 24 were early in person, 2 ballots were cast provisionally. There were no post-election day, and there were 5 post-vote by mail ballots.
Very good.
The vote by mail summary, there were a total of 45 ballots issued by the ballot department in this election. 42 of those were returned and deemed valid for an overall return rate of 95.65. And as I said, every ballot that was returned was deemed valid and counted as part of this election.
Excuse me, Brian, it shows 44 here. Was there?
Yeah, there's the one military overseas that is in the third column there.
I see.
I'm adding that in because that was also returned during the official canvass.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure. If there's no other questions on vote by mail, we'll move on to the provisional voting summary. There were 2 provisional ballots cast in this election. Both were cast at election day at the polls. Both were deemed valid by the registration department and tabulated by the ballot department. So there were no rejections to this election. As I mentioned, there was one remake. It was a Uwakawa, which was returned during the official canvass. We went ahead and remade that according with the ballot remake policy and got it counted as part of the post-vote by mail. There were no overvotes. There was obviously one precinct involved in this election. Voter history will be completed once we certify the results, as well as ballot reconciliation. There are no automatic recounts. The requested recount deadline is Wednesday, March 17th at 4 p.m. The post-election audit will be conducted Monday, March 29th at 9 a.m. and the race will be determined here after certification. I just do want to point out that one race did change from the official to the unofficial. Issue 4, which I believe was Mr. Wade. It was the yeses had it in the unofficial, the noes now I believe have it in the official. Based on the 7 ballots that were returned in the 10-day window, they were 1-6 against for the noes, so it did flip from the official to the unofficial.
That was as a result of the provisional ballot being counted, as well as some absentees.
Yes, there were 5 post-vote by mails and 2 provisionals, which ended up flipping the race to no.
Is there any questions for Mr. Cleary?
No.
Okay, hearing none, I have motion to authorize and approve the remake of the optical scan ballots for February 23rd, 2020. Woodmere recall election. There are no questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. I'll move to authorize and approve the absentee ballots from the February 23rd, 2021 Woodmere recall election. If there's a second.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I will move to authorize and approve the provisional ballots from the February 23rd, 2021 Woodmere recall election. If there's a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Member Sticken. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously, and I will acknowledge the acknowledgement of the pre and post results of the tabulation system from the February 23rd, 2020 Woodmere recall election. I'll point out that those the pre and protest results were emailed to the board members yesterday, so we had a chance to review them. There's a second.
Second.
Thank you, Member Stick. Thank you, Ms. Chappelle. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Chappelle. And then I will move to certify the official results of the February 23rd, 2021 Woodmere recall election, the first of the 2021 season. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Member Stickett. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Terrific. Thank you. The motion passes unanimously, and then I will move to acknowledge the date, time, and place of the post-election audit for the February 23rd, 2021 recall election, and randomly select the selection of the contest to be included in the audit. And if I could have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Chappelle. And then I will have Ms. Stickett,
Okay.
our newest member, pull out one of those pieces of paper and show Mr. Cleary, if you would. Our witnesses. Thank you. It will be Jennifer Mitchell Early. Jennifer Mitchell Early. Continue contact here. Thank you, Ms. Stickett.
Thank you.
We've got a motion and a second. If all those in favor of the time and date, place of the post-audit election signify by saying aye.
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 All right, motion passes unanimously. And now we'll move on to candidate petition services. I will move to certify, we have some new candidates in Berea specifically. I'll move the certification of the candidates to the May 4th, 2021 primary election ballot, if there's a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Sticken, and that deals with the Berea Council at Large. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. I will move for the certification of candidates for the November 2nd, 2021 general election in lieu of the May 4th, 2021 primary election. Here too, it deals with individuals running for office in the city of Berea. If there's a second.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you both. And any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Terrific. Motion passes unanimously. I see Ms. Manager Susi's here too, and I will move to approve to send the voter information guide to all active voters for the May 4th, 2021 primary election. If there's a second.
Second.
Thank you, Member Stick. And Ms. Susi, thank you, Ms. Chappelle. Would you kind of tee that up for us, because we're doing it a little differently, aren't we?
Kendra Zuzi, Fiscal Manager, Board of Elections. I just wanted to give an update on the final quantity being mailed out. It's 214,539 voter information guides. This time we did not bid it. We reached out to our print shop to assist us, and they provided the printing cost is $7,200. The mail house that they utilized was $8,250, and the total postage ended up being $25,744.68, or 12 cents each, for a total cost of $41,194.68.
And this is the first time we're using the county print shop, correct?
We used them in the past for smaller jobs, but this was 214,000. This was a little bit bigger. So we ordinarily would bid it out to a mail house, and they would do the printing and the mailing, but the print shop did the printing, and then they delivered it to the mail house to mail it out.
So we wanted to, we try to partner as much as we can with the county agencies when we can. And so we've talked with them in the past, and they're a little bit hesitant, but they're a little bit more, like, let's try to do some of these types of things. So this was our first pass at it. We had a pre-meeting, it was a good meeting, and I think we ended up with a good product. And so we'll see how it all the way through, and if it's something that we continue on with them in the future, or if we look to go and solicit outside entities.
So we don't have to bid if we're using our own individuals to do the product? Or?
Right, the print shop has on contract already a couple mail houses that they utilize to service the internal agencies. So us being one of them, they were able to do it and use their mail house services that they already have secured.
Okay. And what about the actual printing though? I mean,
They actually do the printing. The print shop has the capacity to do 4-color printing, and they actually did the printing of the voter information guide.
have they done the printing for us in the past, or this is the first time?
Earlier this year, they did a printing of this document, but then it was smaller, so we actually folded it internally here at this building and stuffed it in an envelope and sent it out. This is the first time where they're printing it again. They're using a little bit different paper, because now this will actually get folded in half with a wafer sticker that goes on the top like we typically use. So the paper has to be a little bit more resistant to the elements. And so this is the first time that they're doing something like that with a little bit different caliber paper that will actually, the document will serve itself as kind of like the mailing fees.
But I guess, do we have to go out to bid for this print, or because we're using our in-house people, we don't?
Because it's well, I think what Kendra was saying, because it's an internal, that we're an internal agency to the county, the print shop goes out and they solicit mail house services and all those things.
To do the print.
Well, they print themselves, but the mail house services, which is you send it there, they print the variable data, they fold it,
Right.
So they solicit the bids for that on behalf of the entirety of the county.
I got it.
And then because we use them, we can just, it's through a chargeback, just like when we use custodial services, public work services, and then we just get billed back. for
But
it.
but the actual printing, we bid out in the past, haven't we?
We've been out the entirety, the printing, including mail house services, and all that, as one complete thing.
I guess we're in compliance with the law.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
ordinarily we do the bidding between 1,000 and 25, we solicit informal quotes.
Okay.
And in this instance, the print shop does it on our behalf. They still follow those county rules. So,
And we get charged back.
yes,
For
as
the-
opposed to a direct
Right.
payment to the county.
Okay. Any questions, other questions? Okay, hearing that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Terrific, and I know we have a couple more contract items up here for Ms. Lucy. I will move to approve, to award a sole source contract with 10X Software Solutions to provide election force online poll worker management solutions in the amount not to exceed $250,000 or $50,000 annually for a 4-year period beginning January 21st, 2021 through December 31st, 2025. Ms. Susie, do you want to tee that up for us?
I'm gonna,
Or Mr. Pilati?
yeah, I'm gonna jump in first. So this item and the next item we talk about are, items that we first used in the fall of 2020, when we had to migrate to online poll worker training. And we used, in 2020, we used CTCL grant dollars, or was it this SOS? We used grant dollars to pay for that. The product worked well. There are a couple bugs that we need to work through, but as we go forward into 21 and still in a pandemic situation, one of the things that we can use is the extension of our CTCL grant to pay for this functionality, to continue on with online training. And so our approach to this, the first one that we're talking about now is Force. What that does is it allows the poll workers to externally, they come and they sign up to be a poll worker. Then we can get them credentials and get them access to an online schedule or getting, if they are new, to go to a class, or if they're a returning one, in order to get them, push out the online training for them to do. We can track who's completed it when it comes back, and we gather all those things. Also, what the system does is, for when we have election day, the actual poll workers who will go to the poll places, typically what we would do is we would print out paper payroll cards for them. With the Force software, we were able to electronically place the payroll card on the electronic poll book. And when the poll workers come, they can check in on there. And we can have that as up to date as possible, because now when we print payroll cards, we're printing it the Thursday before the election. And it's that final weekend when we had the greatest fall of people calling off and backing out. So we can, with this, we're able to get something on Monday, so we have a more accurate payroll process, and it facilitates a quicker process. But what we want to do is, and so we will use, again, grant dollars for this year, but our approach is we got pricing for multi-years, but we're going to take it on a year-by-year basis. We're going to see how this works, improve upon what we learned in 2020, get it better in 21, and then hopefully we can continue on. But if it ends up, after having a full year of working with it, that's not meeting our standards, then in the contract that was provided, with 30 days notice, the director can get out of that contract. So I've talked with the owner of 10X, and I've asked, and this is after talking with the management team in both the election officials department and another department who uses a 10X product, to bring in 10X staff on site to sit with our staff to really look at some of these bugs and figure out some of the best practices that we don't know yet, that we can work with them to get that to make the system more efficient. And hopefully, things continue on well. But again, the intent is on a year-by-year basis, we're gonna revisit it and see if we can continue on for years 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because of the working of this software with the electronic poll book for the payroll process, it's all proprietary information, which makes it sole source. What we did is we posted up for a 5-day period the intent to award this, and if any other person thought that they had a product or solution that could meet our needs, they were to contact the fiscal services department, make us aware of that, and then we would take that into consideration. No one responded or provided that to us. And so we did work with Assistant Prosecutor Musson on the contract to get that, so it met his standards and our standards, as well as we worked with the Secretary of State's cybersecurity team on the cybersecurity portions of the contract, so it meets all state requirements regarding cybersecurity. So I just kind of wanted to.
So let me just ask a question. Your comments address both items 7 and 8. I made a motion for 7, but your comments.
Yeah, so it'll apply to that, and I can repeat that for that one, but
I just want to point that out, and you talked about, I mean, is it, and I like the idea you have some flexibility. So you're saying is we're going to use it this year, but if we don't have a problem, we can back out of it for next year.
Correct.
And you talked about, so it kind of sounds like a work in progress, that there's still software design matters that they're working on, but they want to see how we use it so they can, so the software changes necessary.
It is, with a lot of the software, no matter what the company is, they have the software system that you get it off, for lack of a better term, off the shelf, you turn it on, you plug it in, but there always needs to be some kind of customization to the specific entity. Now, their products are geared towards the election business, so we're in that process now where the system is built, but we need to customize it to our needs. And part of that is, for example, our voter registration database, DIMS, how can we interact information from one system to another, which is unique to our county and not all 88 counties, and some of those things. And then it just as we, our business practices, you have to find, do we have to change something we do to meet some of that need, or are we doing it and do they need to do a programming change to meet our operation? So we need to get more into that and how do we make that sync up better. We didn't really have the opportunity to do that in the fall of last year because it was off to the races. You know?
And so, and I recall when we,
Yeah.
you know, we're looking at vendors for EPBs, and these are one of the things we looked at. We build on the product
Mhm.
and expand its usefulness, and I think that's what we see it happening here.
Correct.
At this point.
Yes.
And great. Any other questions for Mr. Pelati and Ms. Susi?
I have a couple, Mr. Chair. So, you know, is there some reason if we are looking at this on a case-by-case basis, we would go ahead and authorize the contract for this term? Why aren't we just doing a, you know, 1 year and annual contract? I guess I'm not really sure why we are opting to enter into a longer term agreement with the ability to get out as opposed to simply just having a 1 year contract that's renewed as we see fit. And the other question I have is, you know, aren't we ultimately going to be wedded to continue with 10X in this, with these products because, you know, it's proprietary? I'm not sure why an online training system or, you know, solution has to be something that we can't go out for bid for. But it sounds like because we have elected them to be our EPB provider, we are somehow wedded to using their proprietary product. And I'm not quite sure that we should be so wedded unless there's some technological reason that we have to be. And I'm just a little unclear because, you know, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like we're always going to be using the 10X proprietary solution for online poll worker training, which to me doesn't make sense why that would have to be sole source. So just two questions there. Why the long-term agreement as opposed to a 1 year agreement that we can renew? And then, you know, the sole source piece. Why would we ever have to continue to have online poll worker training software be a sole source item?
I think to the first point, I think we were trying to lock in pricing for the long term, as opposed to the 1 year, then go back and see the price increases year after year. So that's how we approached it for the first part, was just to get fixed pricing for that, and then that does help with the budget process when we go out for our next biennial budget, knowing what the amounts are to ask for when we go to the county for it. So that was some of the thought on that first piece. The second part is the software we're talking about now, Force, that piece, because it gives us the ability to do the check-in, the time and attendance at the polling location on the EPB, that part is proprietary. So if we want to use that functionality, which we're trying to do, because that will improve the payroll process, that would have to be sole source. However, if we don't want to use that functionality, and you just want a sign-up system, then you don't have to use 10X for that, because you can get some other type systems, but you would never be able to link it in for that time and attendance piece. Now, so that's for that one. The next one that we will talk about, the university, that you can get other platforms definitely to push out videos and all those things. What is nice though, if you are using Force, is that the credentials that are given to track, it all kind of ties together. So that's why we like that. It gives us better metrics and being able to track what our PEOs are doing. But definitely just a tool that would just house videos and PowerPoints and all those things for the online training piece. You could get something else, but then you lose out on some of the functionality, because then you're using multiple systems to push out the material.
Okay, thank you for explaining the rationale there.
Any other questions or comments?
Question, comment. Well, we talked before because I had similar questions. My concern was the length and the term. I knew there were some bugs and just what the plan was to address those. So, and I appreciate you putting that on the record too. So that was the scope of our conversation. I guess if we are to proceed, I would maybe I know you'll keep us updated, but I'd want to monitor that situation. If the bugs and the fixes and if we're satisfied, I mean, it sounds like it's 30 days notice if we're not. Would that be accurate?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And it's, and no reason other than you just indicate we're no longer, there's no process other than 30 days notice.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
And I would think that, through our election cycle of 21, with the upcoming September, November, and whenever the SOS and governor determine on the 11th congressional, we should have enough experience with the system to make a good decision.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion on item 7, which is the approval to award a sole source contract with Tenant Solutions to provide the election force online poll worker management solution. And we've had some discussions and answers to those questions. If there are any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor.
Was there a second on the motion? I didn't hear a second.
You know what, I can second your motion and then we had the discussion. There you go. All right. That way.
Very good.
Okay.
So there is a second to the motion from
All
Ms.
right.
Member Sticken. Thank you, Ms. Chappelle. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion passes unanimously. I will move to approve to award a sole source contract with Tenant Solutions to provide 10K university online poll worker training solutions in an amount not to exceed $150,000, $30,000 annually for a 5-year period beginning January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2025. If there's a second.
Second.
Thank you both. Appreciate that. And we've had any other questions or comments? I think both these items were kind of addressed by Mr. Pilati and
Yeah.
Susie, but any other questions? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. I will move to approve, to award a contract with Cleric LLC doing business as Enterprise Rent-A-Car to provide van rentals in the amount not to exceed $198,396 for the period beginning April 1st, 2021 through May 5th, 2023. If there's a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Sticken. And I know we've used Enterprise. You've gone into great detail explaining, I think, through an email that they were the only bidders and you've been pleased with the performance. But I did see that this doesn't include the special election. Is that correct?
The special election is not specifically carved out as far as the date and the locations on here, but there is the ability when things do come up that aren't there, that they provide that to us. So that's just a lot of times with special elections and items like that, we don't have that in there because we don't know. But then when it does happen, there's language that allows us to engage their services and then for them to bill us.
So I guess I'm just asking, do we have to bid that again? I mean, they're the only vendor that tends to bid on this apparently because the project's so large, but I'm just wondering, and maybe Mr. Muslin can answer it or Ms. Susi, how can we just call them up and say, hey, we need you to do another election and what's it going to cost us as opposed to bidding it?
They, I believe they give us
We did include a 10% contingency with that thought process of possible election coming up. And if it exceeds that, I think we would be able to just amend the contract for that amount.
I see.
The contingency is like 18,000, so if it exceeds that, then I think there is language in there that we can, if it goes beyond, stays within a certain percentage of the not to
Lucy, I see, yes, in your memo to the director and then to the board members, from you to the board members, copying the director, you do mention that 10% contingency was included, and that would be to address the special election.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we do have is that with the Secretary of State or the governor not setting it, we don't know if he's going to sync it up with November, and then there is no additional because we already have that election, or September, or any of those types of things. So we kind of have to wait and see what they're going to do.
So I see Congresswoman budget just been confirmed. You haven't had any conversations with the secretary yet.
I sent an email yesterday, just saying that, we all understand that happened and that myself and my staff are willing and waiting to engage in any conversations that they want to have with us. And basically got, okay, thanks, but we need to talk to the governor's office first. So, but that's as far as most that they were willing to say.
Sure, understood. Sure. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. And on to the approval of the personnel agenda. Mr. Pilati, we have a lateral transfer?
Yes. So, Jeff, I and Joe, you might recall, Lisa, you weren't on the board yet at this point, but back in January at our board meeting, we took a vacant position in our registration department and we reassigned that election official to the fiscal services department. Reason being is that the mail services for this agency for years now really have been fiscal is responsible for it, but it was a temporary employee, a full-time temporary. It doesn't make sense. So we found a better use for that vacancy. So we reassigned the vacant position to fiscal services. With that, with the new county in-force system that unfortunately sometimes you read in the newspaper and not so good. We also use that for budgeting and procurement and all those types of things. It's created a lot more computer work in different layers. And so this position, not only will it do the mail, but it also will get more into the actual administration of the fiscal services, procurement supplies, tracking things and doing those types. And so we posted the position externally. Did not get a big response externally, but Lauren Hodges, who is currently in the registration department, she expressed an interest and sees that even though it's lateral transfer, there's a growth opportunity to get some different skills. As she's working on a master's in public administration, she wants to get more experience with how the behind the scenes of running an agency kind of goes, and she'll get that here. A good worker, great attitude and skill set. So we're recommending that she transfers from registration on a lateral basis to fiscal services.
Any questions for Mr. Pilati? I don't, did I make a motion? I will move to approve the personnel agenda as set forth in our agenda, if there's a second.
A second.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing on all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously. And on to new business, Mr. Pilati.
Okay. Our first item of new business will just be a brief update on the March 16th, 2021 Mayfield Village special election. That election is Tuesday. So finally it is here. This weekend is the one weekend of weekend voting. So we're voting today, Friday ends at 7. Tomorrow, we're open 8 to 4, Sunday 1 to 5, and then early in-person voting closes Monday at 2 p.m. It'll be 8 to 2 on Monday. We have had one early in-person voter for the entirety of the window to this point. So don't have high hopes for big turnout this weekend. Vote by mail tomorrow, 12 noon is the deadline for the vote by mail application. So we'll have staff on hand if we do get an application to be able to here in-house put together the ballot pack and mail out the ballot to them tomorrow. We have processed 307 valid vote by mail applications, and so far or through yesterday have received back 247 of them, which is about an 80% return at this point. So I would guess that we would get another 30 to 40 between today through election day or post-election. It's not a big election, but they're all important. It's 4 precincts. It's 1 polling location in Mayfield Village. On Monday, staff, our election support team will take the equipment out to the polling location around 3 p.m. That will serve as the organizational meeting. We won't be having a separate one, so we'll get it all set up and ready to go. Then on Tuesday, for this election, we're going to have about a 50-50 split of workers, 50% being PEOs who typically work in Mayfield Village. We'll bring them in. And the other 50% will be a combination of permanent Board of Election employees or temporary employees who are recruiters, just again, so we get some more experience on how the election day itself works in real time. As far as election night results, I would guess that maybe between 9 and 9:30, probably closer to 9, hopefully, that we would have the results posted up for the election. That's what I have. If there's any questions on Mayfield Village. Okay. Next item is a polling location update, and I'm going to keep this specific to the May 4th election. For the May 4th election, we do have changes in 4 municipalities, Fairview Park, Parma, Rocky River, and Seven Hills. So those 4 cities together, it's 13 precincts spread out amongst those 4. It impacts about 12,800 voters. The voters who reside in Rocky River and Seven Hills, we knew about those changes earlier on, so they have already received their letter in the mail, making them aware of the polling place change. And the Fairview Park and Parma residents who are impacted, their letter goes in the mail at the beginning of next week because those were just more recent that came about. In Fairview Park, we're moving from the Fairview Village Apartments to the American Legion Post. And this is where at last meeting, Dane Thomas said something that Fairview Park wasn't happy how we handled the PPE situation at the poll place. So I can talk a little bit about that. Fairview Park, this is 3 precincts that will be moving out of the apartment.
Excuse me, Mr. Pilati.
Sure.
This is in a result of members Chappelle had inquired to ask for a little more update about Fairview Park.
Exactly.
And that's what you provided.
Correct. That is correct. And so what I found in talking with staff was actually in November of 2020, the Fairview Village Apartments did not want to be a polling location. They weren't interested, but staff, in speaking with them, got them to remain and stay a poll place for November. So I think part of this is a way for them to kind of get out. And what they had told us is that what they weren't happy with is that they thought that the restrooms at the polling location were going to be deep cleaned and sanitized. And we do just a general cleanup in the restroom. We don't do that. And they expected, although they never told us in advance or until we inquired, that they wanted a professional cleaning service to come in and clean the entirety of the polling location. And I mean, we kept things clean, we wiped things down, but we didn't bring in an outside entity to any agency, and they did not, or any poll place, and they did not make us aware of that as a condition of being November. So those are the reasons why they don't want us back. And they're not interested in even, well, if we do something different, again, I think they want to be done, and this is kind of their way to be out. So that's Fairview Park. Parma, this is a temporary move. We're going to move out of St. Bridget of Kildare to the Greenbrier Middle School. St. Bridget's is in session for May 4th, and they typically close when they know there's an election, so they'll be closed for November. They want to remain a full place. They don't want students and voting going on at the same time. So we will move out for May, come back to St. Bridget's in November when school will be closed. There'll be no students in school. Rocky River, the Rocky River United Methodist Church had been a polling location for some time, but for November 2020, because of COVID concerns, they said no. So the 5 precincts that traditionally voted in Rocky River Methodist went down the street to the Rocky River Civic Center, which made that a 12 precinct location. It is a location that, unfortunately, last November, we heard a little bit about lines, but in talking with the Methodist Church, they're ready to be a full place again. So the 5 precincts that had been historically housed there are going back to Rocky River Methodist Church, and that then will leave, if I do my math correctly, 7 in the Civic Center, and so that should make a major impact on the election day operations there. And lastly, Seven Hills, Hillside Middle School. Is that where? Did you help out there?
Not in Southern Hills, but I know where that's.
Okay. So Seven Hills, they had in Hillside Middle School, they had heavy turnout also in November. It was a 6 precinct location. We were able. There's a NEO church in Seven Hills that we will be taking 2 precincts out of Hillside and putting them at the NEO church. And then I think with that move, that should help again to facilitate with election day operations. In addition to, we already are working on getting more electronic poll books and that incorporated into the locations on top of some of the realignment of poll places. So those are the ones that are impact May. At a future meeting, I'll talk about some other ones where we have a poll place move in Broadview Heights. We have another one in Brook Park, but I can hit on that now if I want, but those don't impact May.
So this is the May primary. So for example, I was at North Royalton Albion School.
Okay.
You just touched on Broadview Heights and Brook Park, but they don't have a May election.
They don't.
So, okay.
No. So I guess just real quick, Broadview Heights, we've secured another location. So 3 precincts are going to come out of the community center and go to, I believe it's a church on the northern part of the city. And Brook Park, work closely with the mayor on this one. And we're actually going to 4 locations in Brook Park. We had 2, we're going to 4. The city owns a vacant school. It was a school, and so they're giving us that. We're going to put 3 precincts in there. Church that we used to use that for COVID reasons kind of got out. They're coming back. So Brook Park actually has 4 wards. So now we'll have 1 ward per location.
Thank you. And just on behalf of all the board members, make a note I know we identified a couple meetings ago, 10 locations. They were, and I think you've touched on about half of them, how we're addressing. So
Sure.
if you could just update the board at the appropriate time before the November election, how we've addressed all these. So we're in a position to explain to the public.
Sure.
Taking steps to remediate the long lines we have.
Yeah, and so most definitely, and I guess just to stay in that same spirit, just this week met with election support department as well as registration department with electronic poll books, and they currently are for all locations in May. We're looking to see, we've identified ones that had high turnout plus high curbside voting and some changes that we're making. So we are figuring out. The goal is to look at March of 2020. So that election never happened at the poll places, but we had an electronic poll book allocation for March of 2020 that would have put us at full capacity. Our goal is to get to that level. And with a combination of, some of it's as simple as changing the length of the table in which the poll books sit on versus maybe you need to pull out one or two more voting booths so you can get an additional table in, but that's our goal, to get to that level. And I think if we get to that level, people get processed quickly through. And then when it comes even to curbside, I think part of the curbside issue as we talk to more people is they showed up, they saw a long line. I'm not getting that line, I'm gonna stay in my car. Well, if there's no line to be seen, I think you're more likely to park, go into the facility and actually cast a ballot. So those are, in addition to putting some more curbside books out where we did have the high and some additional staff. So we're taking a multi-level approach to it.
Any other questions about polling locations?
No, I just want to,
All right,
Mr.
on
Chair,
to,
Mr. Chair, I just would like to thank Tony for the update, and definitely want to hear more about how we're addressing the curbside voting. I mean, I just think that, you know, yeah, maybe people will see there's no line and park their cars, but I think people voted for curbside for lots of different reasons. So I'd be very curious as you think through going forward, you know, what the staffing allocation will be, or the logistics around handling curbside. So, but thank you for the polling location updates.
And I guess even to follow up on that, Ina, Joe, I'm gonna say that this is a good luck thing, that for May, actually, some of the highest hitters are actually in the May election, which is good, because we're gonna try to see how some of these things work. And it's nice to see it in not a countywide first. You know, we think, we know what we wanna do, we wanna try it, and then we can build upon it as we get to September, 11th congressional in November. So by chance, I'm glad that some of those are in May for us, you know, in addition to these poll place changes. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. And I think the last item, at least last item I had planned to talk about was talk a little bit about our voter registration maintenance here at Cuyahoga County. Again, this is kind of coming off the last meeting. Unfortunately, our friends in Summit County had a little bit rough go with some things in their administration of elections, and the Secretary of State put them on administrative oversight. And the question was asked of me to, at this meeting, talk a little bit about some of those things that they got placed on oversight, and how do we process here in Cuyahoga County so we don't end up in that same predicament. And specifically, two of the items I was going to talk about were the maintenance of the voter rolls as pertains to deceased voters and to voters who have felons. And I have Simon Wheat from registration, so if I misspeak something, he's the expert on a lot of these things, he can set me straight. So first I want to talk about deceased voters, and what happens is there is the National Center for Health Statistics, and they gather information on deceased individuals, and they get it from 57 different jurisdictions. Those jurisdictions are all 50 states, the 5 U.S. territories, the District of Columbia, and New York City. So this Center for Health Statistics gathers that information. What they're gathering is name, date of birth, last 4 social security number. And then there's a report that's generated. It's called the Steve Report. And on a monthly basis, all 88 boards of elections are supposed to go to the Secretary of State's website and download this Steve Report. Steve stands for State and Territorial Exchange of Vital Events. And so we do that on a monthly basis. What we do here in Cuyahoga County is when we download that report, we send it to our IT department. And the IT department has a program, a script that they run that kind of washes that list against our voter registration database. And it's looking for exact matches on name, date of birth, and social security number. Where it has an exact match, this process that Helen in IT runs will cancel the records. It's not an exact match on everything though. So the things that are not exact matches, that produces a report of that information. And then Hassani and Betty Edwards with their team go through those on an individual basis. And they're doing more research. They're going into the voter registration database, looking at historical registration cards, seeing if there was a typo or numbers flipped on the social or the date of birth, a misspelling on a name that at some point along the road we did data entry error, and they can fix those things. And when they can get an exact match, then they can do a manual cancellation of those records. But if there's no way at all that there's like we can put the two things together, then that record doesn't get canceled at that point, because you don't want to inadvertently cancel something. But for those individuals who are canceled, whether it is through Helen's automatic script or her assignee manually doing it, we send a letter that started years ago to individuals who are deceased. I know it kind of sounds backwards, but you're sending that letter to the resident, last address we have on file saying our records show that you are deceased. And if by chance somehow something got mixed up, well, that individual will call and then we can correct the situation. So that's kind of how we process and stay on top of this. And again, we do it monthly. All boards are required to do it monthly. And we, again, have a couple different mechanisms to try to make sure we get it as accurate as possible.
Is it, excuse me, is this the process the SOS wants us to follow? I mean, is each county developing their own process?
They own process. SOS is like, hey, here's the report, get it done. So for us, we figured this is how we best get it done in the most efficient and accurate manner. So that's what
So
we
maybe
do.
my question is for Hassani, just drilling down. I mean, this is done once a month, Hassani?
Yes,
Okay. And how long does it take? I mean, does it vary? Is it a week-long process? Does it take a lot of man hours?
I would say it takes about an hour from when IS process theirs. When they send the non-exact matches, it takes about another hour to do the research and make sure that the records that need to be canceled are canceled, and then the records that we can't do anything about, we just leave alone.
Why don't you introduce yourself too, just for the public?
Yes, my name is Hassani Weeks, and I am the Registration Department Program Coordinator.
Terrific. And so, I mean, how many do you get a month about? I mean, is it dozens? Is it hundreds or thousands?
For the Steve report, I would say for the last 3 months, we've been receiving about 1,000 from the Steve report
A
alone.
month.
And I would say 95, 98% of those records would be canceled because they're exact matches. And then the rest would come down to us and we would do the research.
Where it takes more of your time and effort.
Yes,
And that's done once a month, at the end of the month, the beginning of the month, or?
it's usually around the beginning of the month that we will receive the file on the BOE portal for the SOS. Sometimes they send it a little later around mid-month, but the last one that we received was, I believe, March 3rd.
So I mean, there's always going to be a situation where you're going to have deceased voters on the voting rolls, correct? I mean, it just, that's the process,
Yes.
right? People pass away and
Yes.
you don't do it every day.
Right, we don't do it every day, and actually, you're not allowed, so say, for example, you got a subscription to the Plain Dealer and you're reading obituaries, you can't go through there and cancel because of that. You have to either go through this process, or, and Hassani, make sure I get this correct, or I think the family, the survivors have to complete a form and send it in, I think, with a death certificate, documentation, and then we're able to process that. I think even if it's just a simple letter that says, hey, my spouse has passed, I don't think we can't process that.
Right.
You need to have layers.
That is correct. We receive phone calls from voters that will say that their spouse has passed away or someone in their family has passed away. We can take the information, but we also need a certified copy of their death certificate in order to process that.
So we don't deal with the county health department who issues death certificates.
We deal with the Ohio Department of Health. We get reports from them, but we also deal with other municipalities that might send in information. So for instance, like Valley View, they send us a report that says, hey, these people in Valley View have passed away. We will look at that information, make sure it's an exact match, and if everything matches, we will process that.
Based on from another governmental agency giving us the information.
Correct.
Is it the Ohio Association election officials, have they had a seminar on this or best practices, or is this something they discussed about?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I'd just suggest maybe at some point, I know we have members there to reach out and talk to
Sure.
them about, hey, what is there a best practice, or if there isn't, maybe it's something that they could have a seminar on and talk about.
So I actually have, on March 25th and 26th, so I'm a trustee of the OAO. So we have a 2-day retreat where we want to talk about 2021 initiatives and what can we do, and I can bring that up at that meeting. Some just best practices on several things, including processing of these types of records.
So, I mean, I see in the secretary's letter that was made public to the Summit County Board of Elections, they talked about numerous errors in the processing of the Steve report. And it sounds like, we're not making those errors, that we're working closely with our IT people and the registration department to make sure that process is run as smoothly as possible.
Correct. Okay, and then the other thing I was just gonna hit on is the felons. And that was another standalone item that the SOS office identified for Summit County. And so for us in Cuyahoga, on a monthly basis, we get from the criminal division of the county clerk's office a felon report. And that report that we get from them, from the clerk's office, gives us the names of the individuals that are convicted of a felony, as well as then saying that prison term imposed, because we need to have both of those pieces. And so we work with the clerk's office to make sure that that logic of having felony plus prison term imposed is on the report. So we are canceling correctly for individuals. So we do that. Plus the SOS gives us a felon's report. And when we get that report from the SOS, it'll tell us the type of felony, if they are incarcerated, and the length of incarceration. So again, we need to have the felony with incarceration in order for cancellation. So we work that report correctly. But when we get both the clerks and the Secretary of State, we do a similar thing like Steve. Goes to Helen in IT. She's running her script in Maryham, and they're looking for the exact matches. Same criteria, and an exact match through the scripts. Canceled. If not, another report's generated. Comes to signing and his team. They do the research, looking again for typos, whatever it is, and then they make determinations on canceled or it's not canceled. And also similar to the deceased voters, on a monthly basis, then we send out a letter to the felons saying that the record was canceled, and then we also then put a piece in there, though, that when you are no longer incarcerated, you are re-eligible to vote. Making sure that.
Do they have to re-register?
Yes, you have to re-register. So in Ohio, you have to re-register, and we make them aware that in that letter that it's not so one, you're not forbidden from ever registering again, and two, it's not an automatic thing once the incarceration is done. They have to take action.
So the Steve's report, does it come in a software program and you can download, or do you have to physically put the names in?
So the speed report will come in as like a text from Secretary of State's office, and I will put that into Excel, and then that will turn the text basically into a readable format.
I see.
Then I can send that up to our IS department for them to process.
I see. What about the felons now? That is manually entered then?
Felons is also a text file that I send up to IS, and then they'll be able to translate it into a readable format.
I see. And then do we do it, maybe we don't yet, what about the federal? We got the Northern District of Ohio. What about, there are people that get sentenced there to prison. We probably haven't reached out to them yet, have we?
No,
I don't think so.
So let me know if I can help you there, because I practice quite a bit in federal court. The Judge Gahn is the presiding administrative judge, and we can talk to her or her staff, as well as the clerk of courts there. And I'd be happy to reach out on behalf, just because I have a relationship with them, and see if that's something they can assist us with. It's a much smaller number than you get from Cuyahoga County, I can assure you. But there are people that are convicted felons that go to prison. So.
Sure. No, thank you. Yeah, no, we'll figure out how to work with you to get that.
Okay.
So that was the main things I had. I don't know if there's more questions regarding us as it relates to Summit County, or if there's just anything else in
Well,
general.
I just in a general way,
Sure.
but I think we're very sensitive to this. And they weren't ensuring bipartisan control of election administrations or in registration. I mean,
Yeah, so we, through all the election sides of our operations, registration, ballot, poll worker, CPS, we institute bipartisanship in all the things that we do. So we have registered individuals, both parties doing these processes, checking, looking, and so we do ensure that.
and the cross training too. I mean,
Yes.
our assistant manager would be expected to step into a manager's job if they had to.
Correct.
And vice versa. Okay.
Yeah, and especially in registration, they actually have a nice matrix down there. They have a lot of the key duties back there, and they have the employees in there, and they have check boxes, who is eligible to do what. And then what that tells you is, okay, then where can we get those other people up to speed? So we have the most diverse of duties staff to attack all the different things that happen. That happens in the other departments, but I would say in registration with some of the nuances with the registration database, that's, I don't know if it's easier to identify some of those core groups and be able, because you want to make sure that you're not letting somebody loose in that voter registration database who's touching things that they're not at a level to do yet. You don't want to cancel someone inadvertently or change an address or whatever it is. You want to, I mean, that's, got to have it pristine as possible.
Right.
And so we have a good mechanism to monitor that.
Are there any questions for Director Pilati?
Just one, Mr. Chair. I was curious about the cross training, and I'm glad to know at least one department has a formal process to identify individuals who are able to do certain functions. But I would hope we would make sure in every department that we have that kind of flexibility, so we're never left with one person. I mean, everybody's indispensable, but we can't afford to have anybody be indispensable. So, to the extent that we're able to make sure we have cross-training opportunities in every department, I think that would be important. And you're probably doing it, but that also stood out to me from the Secretary of State's letter. Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? Asani, thank you very much. Appreciate your input. Mayor, thank you. No other new business? We're all set?
No, that's what I'm going to hit on for today.
We're going to, any public comments? Mary, does anybody?
No, Chairman Hastings, there's no public comment.
I see Ms. Eisner's on. I think I saw her earlier. I don't know if Adele had any comments. I'll invite her to speak if she'd like. Okay. All right, hearing none, I will move to recess because we have an election coming up.
Correct.
If there's a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Sticken. And hearing no questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, everybody have a wonderful weekend. Thank you and a wonderful day.
All right, thank you.
You're awesome.
Lisa, I need you to sign some documents.
Sure.
I'm gonna hold it to you.
Would you get this? I can put it in there, but.
And there's a bunch of stuff here. I think, is this because of the new ballot procedure?
Yeah, so